If you Google Jesus, I'm sure you'll get an image of Jesus arm wrestling Satan. It's an image I've seen a lot. I don't know if it's just Googling Jesus or strong Jesus, but it's you can see it by yourself. He's arm wrestling him, and there's like behind Satan is like all these dark clouds and lightning and like fire, and then behind Jesus there's like clouds and angels, and it's just they're kind of like in a lock, both of them arm wrestling. It's a ridiculous heretical image because Jesus doesn't have a rivalry with Satan. It's not like it's his rival enemy, because a rival, it means like somebody who you kind of like are always constantly having to come against, and there's usually a competitive, interesting match, but that doesn't exist with God. Our Lord doesn't have rivals because he's God. Nobody, no creature can compete with him. Like zero opportunity. What Satan does do, though, is he gets us into headlocks, which is very hard to come out of. If you're in a headlock, it's unless you know some like special martial art technique, you don't usually get out of a headlock, because the guy who has you in a headlock is controlling your head, and you can't do anything. You can try to hit him with your arms, but it's just nothing really is going on. Somebody else has to come and pry the headlock off for you to get out of it. So Satan gets us into headlocks. His kingdom, as Jesus says today, is not divided. He's working with his troops and with his kingdom. His kingdom consists of this world, which is very hard to be in this world and not to be enslaved to his headlock. It's very hard. We learned in anthropology, a class that we took in seminary, that when a person develops a bad habit, we would call it in Christian language a vice, and in English we have a vice grip, which is what you tighten to usually hold a tool that you're trying to work on, and a vice grip can hold very heavy objects. It's just a metal moving kind of open anvil, which you can put something in and tighten up, and it holds it. It's a vice grip. So when somebody gets into a bad habit, a vice, the neural pathways in their brain start becoming harder and harder. The neurologists call it plasticity. So your brain becomes less, the plasticity in your brain becomes less, which means like your brain can be moldable. The neural pathways can be formed. You can even have what they call neurogenesis, which is the birth of new neurons. It's usually in people who read a lot, who play a musical instrument, who are constantly also trying to like learn new things. Their brain becomes more and more moldable and plasticity. Whereas when somebody's in a bad habit, it becomes harder, the neural pathways form, and your neurons automatically form a pathway which they have a very hard time breaking off of. They're like hitting walls because you're used to acting in a certain way. Your brain literally, physically becomes harder, and you can't come out of it very easily. So that's how the devil gets you in a headlock, through the world. The world is constantly enticing us into habit-forming vices, which is terrible. Augustine described it in the 400s. He says, like, my twisted will, concupiscence, so like we're already inclined towards this. You see, this is why it's so hard, because like the headlock is so strong. So we're already inclined towards this sinful behavior. The twisted will turns into a habit, and then the habit turns into irresistible need. So it's almost like I need this. In his case, he was talking about the libido, the lust. I need to satisfy this lust. And Augustine was an addict. He says himself in his confessions, to sex. He couldn't stop, he said. He says he couldn't stop it. It was like a need that he had to satiate. So if you already have a twisted will that's already kind of drawn towards us through concupiscence, and you're feeding into it and it forms a habit, the world is just constantly supplying, like the drug dealer. He always shows up and he gives you your fix. You just walk outside and it's confirmed. You open up your phone, it's confirmed. It's sex, and it's always feeding the lust. So you got into the habit, and the neural pathways are formed at your vice grip, his headlock. He's got you. Then he's using the flesh. the flesh he uses for his kingdom, which we kind of just spoke about there. You're inclined towards this concupiscence. Your flesh is crying out to be satiated. You either, if it's through sloth, looking for comfort, if it's through the sex drive, if it's through food, you're just constantly trying to appeal this voice of the flesh that's crying out. So this is his kingdom. It's united, and it's all working towards getting you into that grip, that headlock. And our Lord says today, the kingdom will be united. And then he says, gives another image, that it's like a strong man in his house. He's got his possessions. It's in control. Nobody can come through the door because it's his. He owns it. It's an image of the soul in mortal sin. As St. Ignatius would say, the devil doesn't have a hard time. He owns the place. He comes in and out when he wants. It's a soul that goes from mortal sin to mortal sin. It's like his territory. But our Lord says a stronger man comes in there, and if the stronger man comes in there and breaks down the door, ties up the strong man, then it becomes his palace, his kingdom. What the Lord's saying there is that if you're in vice, you're not getting out of it. You're in a headlock, you're done. You can't do anything. You are done. He has you. But if you turn to him, who is the stronger man, he has no rival, he has no enemy that can with him, it's impossible. You turn to him, he comes in, he binds up the strong man, and he throws him out. But how does he bind him up? Well, it's very curious, but he himself became bound. He was tied. He beat Satan by receiving blows. He was beat up. He was dragged around. He was laughed, kicked at, slapped. You see, like, our God isn't like they're like this powerful, jacked, like Christ, which is another image. If you Googled Korean crucifixion, there's a Korean artist that made this crucified Christ where he's absolutely like shredded. His lats come out like a half a foot, both of his lats, and then his shoulders and his arms. He's like ripped, and he's got this like this growling like face on as he's being crucified, which is another heresy. It's not like he was just like this beast of a man who was, at the end, he was crucified and he was kind of like defiant. He was the strong man, but through weakness he defeated. So that's your way right there to let him into your house. Humble yourself, realize your condition. I have a problem, could be an addiction, a vice which has got me. I get to my knees and I soften my heart. Do not harden your heart. Your brain's already getting hard through vice. Do not harden your heart. Soften your heart. Get down on your knees and say, Lord, you who conquered through weakness, make me realize my weakness, and in my weakness you will be strong and you will conquer in me. That is the way right now that he's telling us to walk out and walk away from this kingdom of Satan and come into his kingdom, which is a kingdom of grace, freedom, complete joy, and it's waiting for you right now. So be it.